Sup, gang? It's your scaly host, King Rex here, and I've got a question for you. What do you get when you cross a heavy metal band of animal people with a horde of zombies? What's that? You say you don't know. Well, you're in luck, as we're about to find out as we jump into Part 5 from Nightriders Battle of the Bands. Spoiler alert, it ain't pretty. So put up your feet and tuck your tail as you enjoy the chaos that's about to ensue in this video.
Once downstairs, the Nightriders and Mr. Whaley peered through the glass door window. Axel observed a ravenous group of people growling about the streets. They were snapping their teeth like wild beasts, gnawing on everything from garbage to rubber car tires. In the midst of all this chaos, Axel didn't know what to think. His heart pounded.
This can't be happening. Zombies aren't real. Are they?
Pushing this surreal question out of his mind, Axel's attention returned to the more pressing matter of how to escape their nightmarish predicament. There was no way of knowing how widespread was the zombie epidemic, or at least that's what they were now calling it, but it seemed reasonable to assume it could be no worse outside the city. They had a straight shot to the van, but there were still clusters of animals everywhere. Axel continued watching through the window as a mob of zombies broke through the doorway of the building across the street.
We have to do something, Axel,
he instructed himself in his attempts to muster a persona of courage. He gave his comrades a toothy grin and flicked his tongue.
I say we rush toward the van on the count of 3, fending them off with our weapons. Lonnie will drive and head to the nearest highway out of town. It's probably the safest, with more open space. Does that sound like a plan?
Axel said, waving his red V-shaped guitar like a club. Rolf patted his blue guitar, ready to wield it as a weapon, while giving a nod of support. Can we take a vote? Protested Lonnie.
Perhaps I'll just barricade myself in my room and hide under the bed.
Mr. Whaley shivered and backed away. Despite the fear that hid underneath Axel's confident persona, he felt strengthened from Rolf's enthusiasm. In spite of what had earlier transpired, they were still bandmates, 2 musicians completely in tune with one another. Yes, it was time for them to finally cast aside their differences. It was time to strike up the band. Axel nodded. Then, in the steadiest voice he could muster, he counted.
1, 2, 3!
Axel swung open the door, and with Rolf on his right side and Lonnie on his left, he led them straight into battle.
Over here, bozos,
Axel taunted. Immediately, the group of half a dozen zombies ceased terrorizing the couple in the vehicle and diverted their attention to Axel, Rolf, and Lonnie. Axel initially felt chilled at the realization of there being more than a dozen zombies, which was more than the original 6 he had viewed from the hotel entrance. Like Mr. Anderson, they had the appearance of being everyday citizens with shirts and jackets, but their glazed-over eyes told a different story, coupled with incessant heavy breathing through their mouths. While releasing a deafening growl, the zombies charged toward them as drool dripped from their face like wild beasts. Axel and Rolf wielded their guitars like baseball bats as the zombies charged towards them at an unnatural speed. Once in striking range, Axel and Rolf distributed knockout blows using their guitars as clubs. Lonnie claimed a zombie in the head between his 2 cymbals. Feeling a rush of energy, Axel charged the mob, swinging his guitar as he repelled the clawing hands and snapping jaws. Feeling a rush of adrenaline, Axel charged the mob, swinging his guitar as he repelled the clawing hands and snapping jaws. At one point, Axel felt a weasel piggyback on him from behind, sinking his fangs into his jacket on his right shoulder. Grunting in pain, Axel held the guitar by the body and slammed it into the beast, freeing himself from its grasp. He had no time to focus on his injured shoulder as a rabid, glazed-eyed zebra charged toward him from the front. Axel swung the guitar into the backside of the zebra's head, ignoring the pain from his shoulder.
Now there's some real head banging right there,
Lonnie shouted with a grin as he clanged another zombie with his two cymbals. Axel rolled his eyes at Lonnie's joke, but he was grateful that the lion still had a sense of humor, despite the circumstances. After knocking the remaining zombified attackers in the street, the band had a brief moment of reprieve from the fighting.
What now?
Cried Lonnie, still panting from the physical exertion. Just as the words left his mouth, the rumbling of a stampede crashed in the distance.
Now might be a good time to head for the van,
Axel said in a nervous voice. He slowly stepped away from the direction of the approaching sound as they gazed at the line of wrecked cars that plagued both sides of the road. They could see figures leaping abnormally high over the obstacles as they charged in their direction.
Head for the van,
Rolf shouted in agreement as he ran down the street with Lonnie.
What about Whaley?
Axel said, noticing their walrus friend was nowhere to be found.
Forget Whaley,
retorted Rolf.
He's probably hiding under a bed or something.
Axel released a growl of frustration as he reluctantly followed after his bandmates. Once they had all entered the van, the tires screeched as Lonnie floored it.
Why the heck are you taking 7th Street?
Rolf scolded, anxiously leaning forward in his seat.
Now's not the time to be a backseat driver, Rolf,
Lonnie yelled as he struggled to remain focused on the road.
From where we're at, it would be a lot faster to exit the city on the east side. Are you sure about that?
Just shut up and let the man drive,
Axel growled. He was no longer able to continue his angry silence toward Rolf. Rolf gave Axel a menacing scowl and leaned over so they were face to face. Trying to ignore him, Axel continued looking ahead, paying attention to Lonnie's driving, but Rolf growled into his ear.
Listen, Lizard, you might see yourself as the face of the band, but if you tell me to shut up one more time, I'm gonna bust the rest of those scales right off that pretty face of yours.
Keeping his mind on their dangerous predicament was all Axel could do to restrain himself from having another brawl with Rolf.
I'm gonna quit,
Axel thought.
What choice do I have? If I survive this, I'm gonna have to quit.
He looked at the floor to see his scaly tail swishing about. He tended to do this when he was nervous or feeling conflicted. It was one of those things like sighing or scratching your head. Axel's tail would subconsciously begin swaying left to right, and it was not until an acquaintance once pointed it out that he even realized that he did it. He released a deep sigh as he weighed the prospects of potential decisions, but realized that none of his options were favorable. After all, he left his former band to escape from a bad situation. And to think he was delusional enough to believe joining the Nightriders would be an improvement did little to increase his confidence in his decision-making. Sure, he was aware from the beginning of Rolf's infamous reputation as a hothead and difficult to work with. Indeed, it was common knowledge that Rolf was a loose fuse. Nevertheless, coming from his previous bad experience with the Dirty Rats, he really believed working with Rolf would seem like a walk in the park.
Maybe the problem hasn't been the band members so much as it has been me,
Axel pondered.
After all, these were the people I chose to work with. Mother was right.
She always told him that he was the most rebellious and stubborn hatchling she'd ever raised, and that he'd always acted before he would think. Heck, that's what she said about his decision to join a heavy metal band rather than work at the same job at the steel mill like his father.
But no, Stubborn Axel always had to take his typical rebellious route, seeking fame and fortune to prove to Mommy and Daddy that he was capable of so much more.
In the midst of this disappointing day, the factory job was beginning to seem very inviting. As Lonnie drove down a deserted street, Axel exhaled and tried to calm himself. While he had trouble with Rolf, there were bigger matters now. The world had changed overnight. Now nothing was certain, except for the undeniable fact that the three of them were prey in a jungle full of predators. Band gigs, money, and pride were now strangely irrelevant. They were finally all united by the sacred desire to survive. Axel only hoped it would be enough for them to make it through this dark, sinister night.
Yeah, Axel, I think there's probably bigger things to worry about other than getting along with Rolf. Like, trying not to get eaten? Yeah, that's probably a good place to start as far as setting life goals. Thanks for joining us for Part 5 of Nightriders Battle of the Bands. Until next time, this is King Rex signing off.